Welcome to Ready to Be Strong. I'm Tania Israel.
And I'm Pema Rocker.
Together, we're broadening our minds, opening our hearts,
and strengthening connections to face the challenges of living in a divided world.
In this episode, we're talking about oaths, commitments, and aspirations. And I am delighted to welcome Pema Rocker back to the show.
Thank you, Tania. It's wonderful to be back.
And I'm also very excited to welcome you to my closet.
It's kind of a joy to be in your closet.
Yes, well, we happen to have the opportunity to be in the same location to record, so we decided to go ahead and do it. So the topic we're talking about is oaths. And on Inauguration Day, the President and Vice President of the United States took their oaths of office. Other elected officials and government employees also take oaths. But what about the rest of us? Are there commitments that we are willing to make to the collective, to our country, to our communities, to the world? You know, just a small question to kick us off today.
Just a small one.
Just a small one. Do you have thought?
Well, what comes immediately to mind when we just a small one is that there are lots of different sizes of commitments, and that presidential and vice presidential oath seems like a really, really big one. And it reminds me now that there are plenty of smaller commitments that we can make that maybe happen on a daily or weekly basis that feel like they have less stakes. But when it comes to connection and kind of helping to build our collective, those stakes kind of add up. The kind of flow adds up.
Yeah. Well, I want to start with this assumption about the oath that the president takes, because I got curious about what does the president say on Inauguration Day? And so I looked it up, and the oath is actually specified in the Constitution of the United States, which I thought was very forethoughtful and perhaps slightly micromanaging of our founding fathers. But it's in there, and this is what it says. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. It's actually, that's it. It's mostly about I'm going to do my job and I'm going to protect the Constitution. And I was like, wow, I like that as a commitment. You know, is that a commitment I could make, that I'll do my job? And not just my employment, but what's my job as a citizen or resident of this country? So that's kind of where I got thinking about, what kinds of commitments can we make? And I mean, the commitment to, it's a small commitment, it's a short oath, committing to protect and defend the Constitution. It's small, but it's also enormous. It's all of that. There's a narrowness of it or a specificity of it, but that's also quite a large commitment to make.
It's a large commitment for that one office holder to make, or those two office holders? Is that what you mean by large commitment?
Well, okay, so because the oath is in the Constitution, then I was like, really? So I went and read the Constitution, which is such an interesting document. There's so many things that I want to talk about with the Constitution, but one of the things that struck me is that I could spend a lot more time getting to know the Constitution. That if I were going to swear to defend it, then I'd really need to know it much better than I do. I guess that's the thing, is that the Constitution is a complex document. It's basically the history of the changing values of our country, or the values that our country was founded on, and then those have shifted over time too, to some extent. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I'm thinking.
So can I share with you what I'm thinking and get it out of the way?
Oh, please.
Others might be thinking this. So here I am with my emotional response. As ever, welcome back, Pema. There's two tracks of what I'm thinking. One is, what a vivid reminder that I live here inside of these agreements that we make to the government that we live inside of. Mm-hmm. And also, politically, there has been so much football. There's been so much back and forth and all of the division that you write about and that we talk about. So with Ready to Be Strong, what I took on in exploring these ideas is this internal exploration of my constitution and fortitude. Like, what's my internal strength? And how can I build it for my place in the collective, for the people that I live with? Because everything I'm reading on social media, schisms that I'm feeling in different friend groups, they are tearing me down. Tearing down my constitution. And when I think of who got into office and what's happening despite the oath, I have feelings and opinions. But because I've been working on being ready to be strong, I'm thinking about checking my automatic thoughts and feelings and thinking that's that one person, very important role. But there's an entire country of others of us who also live here and abide by the values in the Constitution, the values that we have toward each other. And so I wanted to say all that out loud so I could kind of clear the space to really get to, wow, what's this conversation about taking an oath? What's this really mean to me about whatever the job holder is doing? What's meaningful to me, and how can I and my community connect to this oath taking, this Constitution that you're talking about?
I love that you're talking about our internal constitution too, just like our makeup, and how do we fortify ourselves so that we can bring what we can to the collective, to our country, to strengthen our democracy. There's certainly plenty of critique that we can have of elected officials. And this country is made up of all of us. And so I'm like, if every single one of us were doing our best to support and defend the Constitution, what would that look like? And I'm really excited about that as a possibility to focus on. I was just talking to somebody recently and they said, what are you doing to sort of get through these difficult times? And I said, I've been listening to Team of Rivals, which is this book about Abraham Lincoln's cabinet. And they're like, interesting choice. And it's funny because back in 2016, I was listening to the book about Alexander Hamilton that the musical was based on. I find it really fortifying to go back in our history to some of these revolutionary or divisive times and get a better understanding and grounding in our country and in the values and the importance of what we're doing here as a democracy. And it makes me feel so patriotic in that I feel so committed to doing what I can to help this continue.
This feels like a really good time to talk about democracy. What even is that word? We hear it bandied about. If you pick any word in language at all and repeat it 25 times, you can hardly understand the word anymore. Have you ever played that game? Even if it's your own name. Like, we hear it so much and we hear it fought over. Since you're talking about values, will you talk to me about democracy? What is democracy to you? Like, what are the values that are important to you about democracy?
Democracy to me is about, it's the people rule. And we're not a direct democracy. We don't all vote on every bill. We have a representative democracy where we vote for people who are going to be the decision makers. But we choose them, and we choose them in ideally free and fair elections that happen on a regular basis. And that isn't how everybody in this world lives. And I know that democracy is not a perfect system, that not everybody has equal power in our democracy. I know that. But boy, is it better than an autocracy. Boy, is it better than a system where the people in power are the only ones who are making decisions about who gets to stay in power. So democracy gives us so much possibility of contributing to the collective. And we're not necessarily taking full advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. Who's the we? Do you mind if we just get real granular for a little while? Like, who's the we we're not taking full advantage?
Well, we, the people of the United States of America, I mean, a lot of people don't vote. To me, that's the most basic of what we can do to participate in our democracy, I think.
So, I mean, I know that there are people who don't vote because they feel like it doesn't apply to them. And I'm thinking, what are some smaller applications of democracy in action that aren't necessarily applied to a governmental action? Like, what is democratic? Is it like, it means I have a voice, right? It means that I have a say in something. And even if I don't get what I vote for, at least I have a say in it. Whereas an autocracy, I don't get a say. Just the people in power have the say over what happens, right? Well, that feels important. That makes me want to vote.
That's great. Like recognizing that you actually have power makes you want to exert that power.
And if I feel like I don't have any power, if I feel disempowered entirely, it makes me feel tired and apathetic and irritated and like I want to go do something else instead of figure out how I'm going to get down to the polling station.
Yeah.
And then that makes me think, well, if I feel disempowered about things that feel bigger to me, what are the things that make me feel empowered in my community? So if I'm voting for myself and my community's interests anyway, and I feel disempowered by the choices that are being made beyond me, what are my commitments to my community?
I think that's part of it. We empower ourselves. If we're feeling disempowered, I think to some extent it's because we're not recognizing where we can actually do something. That's not to say that everybody has equal power, but there's something that we can each do to make a difference. But it means exerting those rights. It means that we have to engage. We can't just sit back and watch or post on social media. That to really, I think, fully realize our democracy, we need to participate. And so voting is part of that. Volunteering at the polls could be part of that. Encouraging other people to vote could be part of that. But even if it's not in terms of electoral politics, we can volunteer in our communities. We can engage. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do to demonstrate and to kind of reinforce the power that we each have to realize the promise of our country.
So for a long time and at different times, I have thought, how do I even contribute? I mean, is donating money to a cause even helping? It feels like I submit something into the void. Or other times I can actually absolutely see what a donation is doing. But when I think about being more active, sometimes it has escaped me what to do, what I can actually do. And it's also fun to slow it all the way down and think, well, what are things that people do to contribute to the community, to create a vital collective? And I think about hyperlocal, and in my neighborhood, there are signs that go out on the street corners every weekend that say there's like pick up canned food Tuesday. Neighborhood volunteers drive around and pick up canned food that folks have left out at the end of their drive in a special box. And there's a canned food drive every Tuesday. And that same organization has expanded and will reach out to have events like making greeting cards for some elderly folks who are in a congregant care home down the way. Or there was funding to create period packs for menstruating women and girls in camps, like people who were living outside. And lots of community members came together, and there were stations all throughout the room where we filled the bags in a little assembly line. There was another little greeting card section where we put made cards and put them in the little packs. And that felt so good to both be together in the room with people who also wanted to contribute, but to also know that, oh, this is going somewhere. This connected feeling is traveling out of the room into other parts of the community that I'm not usually in touch with, to help further the connection. And that's not voting exactly, but that's like getting that vital connection flowing.
Yeah, it's participating. It's engaging. I think that's great. I mean, there are your question of like, what can we do? I mean, the first thing that I thought, the first commitment that I want to make is to just get to know the Constitution of the United States better. I started reading it and then reading about it. There's this amazing story about how the 27th Amendment came about. It's the last amendment that we've ratified back in the 90s, but it came about because a college student wrote a paper about this amendment that had been like passed by Congress back in the 1800s, and it was never ratified. And then the student like got a C on their paper, and they were so outraged that they were like, I'll show them, and went and got it ratified.
Okay, I just want to say parenthetically, that is some constructive outrage. Let's all channel our outrage thusly.
Yeah, it's such a great story because it's about getting to know the Constitution and then recognizing what you can do, the power that we have as the people to contribute to this country and to the rules of this country. I mean, it's funny because every time I am a leader of an organization, I revise the bylaws. So I have a lot of experience revising the bylaws. A few years ago, I took a look at the Constitution. I was like, oh, that's the bylaws. It's the bylaws of our country. And I was looking for what I wanted to know more about the Constitution just this past week. I was looking for kind of a clean version because when I revise bylaws, I've got the track changes version so that everybody can see the changes that we're making. And then we vote on it and then accept all the changes. And then there's this new version. I can't really find it. I'm sure somebody will tell me then that this exists, but I couldn't find very easily, at least, a track changes version of the Constitution because the way it's written is it lays out the original Constitution and then the amendments follow. And there are some versions where it's like there's an annotated version. So if you like hover over this section, it'll be like, the 12th Amendment changes this in this way. And I thought, well, that's so interesting. What it means then is we always have the original Constitution there, which is, has some very problematic things in it. Like every time you look at the Constitution, you have to see the thing about, oh, some people are only 3/5 of a person when we're counting, And that's disturbing, but it does remind us of the history of our country. And then the amendments remind us of where we've course corrected and where we've improved. So I'm like, okay, foundation of our country, not necessarily what everything that we would want it to be, but we can also change it over time through the will of the people. It's got to be like a big group to make those changes. I find it so interesting, just those pieces of the Constitution and how it helped me understand that the Constitution's a living history of the values of our country.
Mm-hmm. And so how do we enact our values? I mean, I love hearing that you can see how it once was and see how the changes have come in and how we can sit here and talk about how might it change again and maybe again. That phrase that it's a living document.
The thing that I've been thinking about in terms of what commitments I would want to make, and I thought, well, commitments, would I feel more comfortable if I said aspirations? Maybe. But I really do want to get to know the Constitution better and commit to supporting it. I think I can support it in a number of ways. By getting to know it, by participating in the ways that the Constitution outlines that I can participate in our democracy. And maybe by amplifying that for other people. There are going to be so many things, and there have been so many things in the last 5 or 10 years especially, that just we are reacting to and emotionally activating kind of material. So that, I think, is a good time to say, you know what, maybe I'm not going to focus all of my energy on social media as a source of information about this country, but maybe I'll go back to some of the foundational documents and say, let me ground myself in some of this, in some of the values of our country, the history of our country, and maybe then be able to also understand it from a bigger view.
And there are so many opinions about how change is afoot right now. A lot of people say that democracy isn't as good as it could be and that it was founded by colonial settlers. But if this change is apparent as the ages go by, change is apparent in the Constitution. This college student brought about Amendment 27. Track changes is in full effect. Then instead of that kind of disempowering feel that comes over me and sometimes others when I'm listening to folks talk, like, yeah, but democracy is not the answer either. Well, if there's not another alternative in place yet, then what are the living changes that we can be incorporating our values into while change is afoot?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember Schoolhouse Rock. Love Schoolhouse Rock. And people in our Gen X generation often know the preamble to the Constitution, but only if we sing it, which I'm not suggesting we do right now. We'll make sure we put a link in the show notes. Because of that, like, I know the preamble to the Constitution, and it says, "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union." And the more perfect part of it is really striking to me, because that says to me, we're always trying to improve on this. We recognize that this is not the epitome of what it can be, but it's, again, better than a monarchy or an autocracy, and it is something that we can all participate in improving. And maybe that's the other thing, is having the long view. We recognize that everything takes time. There's not always an immediate effect that we would want. Yes, there are some things that can be changed immediately, and sometimes executive orders will do that, and sometimes they have to go through other systems to be implemented. But a lot of the way our country operates is based on some foundations of things going through a process.
So understood that there's a process and that it's a long-lasting, long road sometimes that ends up to positive effects. What would you tell me from that perspective of participating in democracy to do with my impatience?
Tell me more about your impatience.
So there are folks younger than us who are tired of waiting. And there are a lot of folks who are outraged, who are tired of waiting. And I am thinking like, okay, this is a process that comes to a positive effect. How do I channel my impatience into the process?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because it's so easy to be disappointed in things not being as we would hope they would be. And one of the things I always try to do is focus on small victories. And if all we're focused on is the presidency or on Congress and who's in those offices, we are missing so much of what makes up the government of our country and the leadership of our country. So school board races, what can we do on a very local level in terms of our government? What can we do to participate in terms of, there's appointed positions on lots of boards and committees that are happening at the local, county government, also state government level, like commissions and things. And so there's ways people can volunteer to actually participate within the government. And one of the things, because I've done that, and one of the things that I've learned from that is how incredibly slowly anything happens and the minutia of what goes on in government. And that can be frustrating, but knowing that and understanding that gives you power. Like, knowing how government truly works is one of the best ways to empower yourself to make a difference in it.
I'm hearing you talk about putting oneself forward into positions like that. But I'm also aware that as you say that, there are lots of positions that support someone who's running or support someone's seat in a position that's elected or appointed. And that's participating also. Like, I might not want to have a vocal seat. I might think I'm terribly indecisive, but I am super organized. I can help in that way. I think it's interesting to think about participating from that perspective too. all the positions that are in motion without being seen.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is one of the most helpful skills in our democracy is engagement with other people. I know a lot of people in this last election wrote lots and lots of postcards because I know that people really wanted to participate. One of the things about postcard writing is it's this very one-directional form of communication. And it doesn't necessarily build our muscles that we have in terms of being in the nuance and difference of where people might be. So we can send a postcard that says, like, whatever it is that we think other people should need to hear, but we only know what they want to hear if we listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the commitments that I feel like I've been making in the work that I do is trying to cultivate my understanding of and engagement with other people in this country, and especially those who are different from myself. I mean, honestly, everybody is different from myself in some way, but people whose values and ideologies and life experiences might be different from my own. Because I think that's actually one of the real strengths of our country is our diversity. I mean, all of the different kinds of diversity that we have. And if we are not understanding those other people clearly, then it's going to be really hard for us to advocate for anything effectively.
Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about what it feels like to come together, to listen, to come together in conversation if that's available to us. And especially if there is something to resolve, and if that something to resolve might be hard to resolve. What I've been thinking about today is what happens when you come together and you just can't resolve it. There's no answer right now. Mm-hmm. And what I came away with, at least today, is at least there are several things that have occurred in the coming together to listen. One is that you actually came together and made space for each other to hear each other out to whatever degree that was possible. And there's a conversation about how do we resolve this. So there's a desire on each other's part, hopefully, to resolve it. But even if we didn't get to a resolution, the work is still kind of hanging out. Like it's going around in my head. I can feel it. I can feel my body resting differently in having had the connection. And there's also that. There's connection. There's the experience of having had the connection. Whereas if I wasn't willing to have the conversation or to be in that same space and listen, there would not be the experience of connection. And I feel like that connection, even if there isn't yet a resolution, is enough to keep going. It's enough to stay in it with each other, even if we have to take a long break, mm-hmm. You were talking about personal victories or small victories. And it made me think of a small victory that I had in a personal way that came from a very difficult conversation where we were hopefully going to resolve something, but turned out the conversation was way too big to resolve in one talk. And my biggest effort was, Pema, stay focused on a single point. Don't talk about the 17 other points that are here. Talk about one point for the duration of the conversation and listen after you talk about it and then stay on that point again. And it was a hard conversation. I felt beat down halfway through, but I kept thinking, just stay connected to the point. And what happened is by the time it was over, I felt A, like I had left some things out, but that was the point. But B, like we just had an hour of connection in a time where we would never have connected because we were in such an upset, in such a break. But we committed to one point, and that kind of made available to us the next conversation, should we choose to have it. And that wasn't available to us before that one conversation. So we didn't make a resolution, but we stuck to one point and we got a connection out of it. And it makes me think, well, that's a small victory. That's really a big one that I can take with me in that realm of participating, not just there in that one place, but like out there in my community in conversations? Can I be present and just listen and stick to one point and share? Can I use my voice in the room on this one point? So often I have felt like I can't, but having that experience made me realize A, I can, and B, I came away with the experience of connection where before there was none.
Yeah, that's great. It's great that you did that. And you were saying like a commitment to a point, and so there's a commitment. It's actually a commitment to stay focused rather than just diffuse and all over the place. And if you stay focused, sometimes you can make more progress than if you throw everything in. It also makes me think about the importance of that is not necessarily, like you said, coming to resolution, but some of it's about talking and some of it's about hearing, but I think even more it's about humanizing and just being present with another three-dimensional human being and accepting them in all their humanity and wanting to know more about them.
I love that part, wanting to know more. I might get offended or sad, or I might jump to conclusions, but I wanted to start with curiosity.
Yeah. My first book was all about how to have dialogue. And then I had to write another book because I realized it's not all about dialogue. Some of it's just about how we think about other people. And we have all these cognitive biases that get in the way of us being able to perceive other people clearly. And it turns out that dialogue does actually help with that. So it can come back around to dialogue, but there's other things that we can do just to correct our misperceptions. And so for me, that's one of my commitments to make, is to try to correct my biases that I have and to then be curious. If people aren't the narrow stereotype that my brain makes them out to be, then what are they?
Yeah. Do you let them tell you that?
Not only let them, I really want them to tell me that. And I also recognize that when, we each portray ourselves as we see us, and so somebody might hear when I say, oh, this is what my values are and this is why I'm doing this. And they might be like, well, I think that this person's really motivated by something more selfish or whatever it is, because that's one of our biases that we have, is that we see our own motivations as being caring, benevolent, and protective. And we see other people's motivations as being selfish and hateful, if they're on the other side, if they're in the other group. So yeah, I can hear other people. There might be a part of me that goes, oh, I don't really believe that. But then I go, wait a minute, that might be my bias. Like, I'm actually interested in where they think they're coming from. I don't need to interpret it all through my own lens.
There's this great exercise that I'm learning in my coaching certification, which is around perspectives and working with a client's perspective that is really stuck in one spot. And it's not serving them and they would like to change it, but it just feels impossible to move out of that perspective. And the exercise includes let's explore another perspective. Let's explore some perspectives you're thinking about that other people might have. And let's explore the perspective of this shirt. It's blue. What does blue feel like? What's blue thinking about? Let's explore the perspective of the window in your wall. What are you seeing out and what's it telling you? Like these funny little ways to just jostle out perspectives that could be all around you, and then to take that difference and lightness and cast it as a lens over that stuck perspective and ask, what is this stuck perspective? What is it feeling or thinking through the lens of whimsical blue shirt? And it sounds funny, but it actually works to take another perspective, lay it over the one that is stuck, and let it inform. And when I think about that from the perspective of bias and listening, actually wanting to hear what somebody else says past my own bias or what they're meaning, it's helpful. It's helpful for me to remember that I have a bias or biases, but it's also helpful to see oh yeah, there are ways for me to listen from around the other side of the bias.
Yeah, and the first thing is probably recognizing that we're stuck in a certain perspective and wanting to get another take on things. And it might not sit as comfortably with us as the place where we're stuck that we see things. But it's actually not empowering to be able to see things only from our very narrow perspective that we have. It's much more empowering to understand perspectives other than our own.
Yeah, I was going to say it feels freer too. I mean, sometimes it could feel limiting, but on the whole, my experience is that it feels freer.
Yeah. So at this point, I think there's a few things that I am willing to make commitments to. I'm willing to commit to learning more about the Constitution, and maybe not just willing, I'm enthusiastic to learn more about the Constitution, and then to enact our democracy in the ways that I can as an individual. And I'm also committed to understanding people whose views, values, and life experiences are different from my own, and really approaching that with a curiosity and an openness, knowing that having more of that understanding and connection actually does strengthen our democracy.
Yeah.
How about you, Pema? Do you have commitments that you would like to make?
Well, I often think, like I was referring to before, I think, well, what is my contribution? These times are changing. And so what is my contribution as we move through them? I've often thought, what does security look like when things are changing so abruptly or so much? And I have thought, you know what I can contribute? I've coached for a long time, but what if I get really skilled at it? And what if my contribution is my listening and is my commitment to devoted and loving action and to helping people find their ways through what they're creating in these times that are changing so much. What kind of security they want to create for themselves and for each other. And so my commitment feels both personal, it also feels professional, but also feels really community driven. Like I want to help people feel more empowered in themselves at a time that we're getting so much feedback or we're responding to it in ways that make us feel disempowered. Nobody's taking away this local power right here that I'm sitting in. Some stuff is threatened. Where are the internal resources and the communal resources that can help us through that? Where can I find the next step, the next footing? So I'm really committed to my community in that way.
So I'm hearing empowering ourselves and others to really do the things that we can rather than focusing on the stuckness. Pema, thank you so much for being in this conversation with me.
Thank you for inviting me into the conversation again and again.
I'm Tania Israel, professor, psychologist, and author of Facing the Fracture.
And I'm Pema Rocker, creative coach and author of Ash and Spirit.
Make your choice.
Are you ready to be strong?